I want to introduce a good buddy of mine, Pete Harrow from the Rebel Fleet,
Thanks, Warren.
based out of our cousins across the ditch there in New Zealand. And Stephen here is as well, who's based in the Gold Coast from the Rebel Fleet. I'll let Pete do a little intro of what they're about and what they're up to in their move into Australia.
Yeah, cool. So I guess first of all, hi, I'm Pete. I trained to be a colourist when I was 18 years old. Worked in the UK, did a few feature films over there before then coming over. And the idea when I came over to New Zealand was that I was going to start seeing the world and not sit in a dark room. Didn't really happen. I just changed it up for a dark van and then sat in there for a long time. So I do a lot of DIT, a lot of dailies, and that's sort of where I've sort of fitted in. So I joined the Rebel Fleet about 5 years ago. So I just want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the Rebel Fleet was basically a band of guys who used to work on set, all DITs, video split, all the rest of it, and just thought that things could be done a bit better. And that, you know, if we brought it all together, we could actually make something that's really cool. So we started up about 5 years ago. Actually, Rebel Fleet started 7 years ago. I joined about 5 years ago, and it's been a really good sort of transition in. So what we do is we try and take over a little bit more of the workflow, and we try and actually sort of manage it right the way from the camera all the way through to delivery to post and things like that. And that way we can actually ensure that what we're doing, as Warren mentioned, we had all of the monitors on Lord of the Rings, and we just maintained all of that. So we were 100% sure that that SDI feed coming out the camera matched right the way through every monitor you were looking at, right the way through to then dailies and what your director and DOP are seeing in the edit. So I'm going to jump into a little bit about what we do and how we do it, and then talk about the cool stuff, which I'm a bit of a nerd, so I do apologise for that in advance, but we talk a lot about metadata. And to me, that's one of the most important things to be handing over as we go through all of these processes, especially now that most shows are VFX heavy, everything else. That metadata that can be captured on set and then travel right the way through and give your compositor, give your VFX artist that little bit more knowledge about what was going on set. We think that's the really important thing, and that's where we want to push towards. So where do the Rebel Fleet sit in? So we start off with workflow design. We quite often get in touch with, or productions, especially in New Zealand and starting more in Australia, productions will contact us when they're in pre, and they'll start saying, well, how are we going to do this? What's the workflow? What's the best way that we can actually design our flow to be as efficient as possible? The next step is DIT, so that's my real sort of passion, and that's looking after everything for the image capture and the DOP, etc. Then into video split, so we can actually show the director and ensure that he's seeing back exactly what he wants to see as and when he says, can I see scene 23, take 2, because I'm going to refer to that for tomorrow. Then moving into dailies, and now VFX pools. So VFX pools is a new thing that we've gone into, mainly because we've been able to combine all of this rich metadata going through the process, that all of a sudden we were like, well, we need to hand this over and we need to give this to the VFX vendors so they've got some more stuff to work with. So connected workflows, camera to post. Here's a very quick diagram of sort of what we do on set and right the way through the workflow. So I've split it up into a few things. So we've got the main unit, second unit, splinter unit shooting, and then we've got production, we've got the VFX vendors, cloud storage, and then the daily system back at Rebel Fleet. And we utilise Moxion quite a lot. I mean, this could be Frame.io, it could be whatever you use as your online tool. We love Moxion because basically they came up alongside us in New Zealand, and we were using them and we were beta testing them as we were learning what we were doing. And they've been a real success story, just been bought by Autodesk. So that's a great little story, that one. So I'll be talking a little bit about Moxion. I'm going to log in and we're going to see some live footage as we're recording going straight through. So let's start off. I'm just going to break it down and we're going to jump into main unit for the moment. So while we're here, we've got obviously your cameras are shooting, it comes through to your on-set DIT, then into your Q-Take who's feeding your director, etc. And then we've got different people that can add metadata and add some information about the shoot that's going on. So I'm going to start off by talking about the cameras. Cameras have come so far. In the short time that I've known digital, we are now able to capture so much information from the camera itself. The information that travels straight down the SDI feed has become huge. So we can get all your ASA, all your ISO, your t-stop, your focal depth, focal length, all of those things, what lens is on, everything actually travels down that SDI feed now. So we can capture that straight away in the DIT station. And we can also then compare it to what we've got written down, and you'll be able to actually then go through and make sure that what your DOP's asked for, that's what's going through. So you can see that straight away on the SDI feed coming out of the camera. So how do we do it in DIT? Is we actually take a log feed from the camera, we apply the LUT, we do any color grading with the DOP in a tent, and that's sort of our first step on the way towards creating the look for any picture that we're working on. The cool thing now is with these smart lenses that we're getting through. So on the last project I worked on, we had all smart lenses on there. We were able to capture all the T-stop, not only as this is what it was when we were shooting, which is typically where your camera assistant goes in and writes down they were at 2.8, but now we've actually got it so we can capture it on a frame by frame basis, coming straight from that lens. So we can go through and ensure that when you're doing that, if they've had to pull iris because all of a sudden the sun's come out, whatever else, we can actually capture that for that exact frame and know what the T-stop was on that moment. And then of course the camera itself records all of this extra metadata that we can utilize, and it stays on the camera itself or comes down the SDI feed. The other cool thing now is internal filters. So with a lot of the ARRI cameras, etc., you can switch on an internal filter. It's going to drop an ND in front of the sensor. We can then record that as well. So we can even know right the way down to what sensors are in the camera. So, jumping into DIT, the typical DIT system and software that is used is Pomfort LiveGrade. It's a great bit of software and can be used on multiple cameras. All you need to do is plug in your cameras into a LUT box and then plug the LUT box into your outputs. So then we can start working through on all the different things here. So, just to go into what we've got in our LiveGrade settings here, is up the top here, these are all the shots that have been shot, and we can see all of that metadata that's come down the line, the frames per second, the ISO, white balance, lens model, all of this really good, rich metadata that can come in. And then the great thing here is we can also, as a DIT, you can start writing comments. So you can actually go in and say, the DOP didn't like that shot, or the sun came out and therefore that's an NG from the DOP. Quite often when the shots get chosen, it's because the director and the script supervisor have discussed it and said this is the best and this is what we like, and the DOP's just, ideas or thoughts don't necessarily always make it through to editorial and to post. So in this instance where we'll actually go, well, now your DIT can actually make those notes and ensure that the DOP's opinions go all the way through as well. So that's really cool. Here we've got, very basic CDL and LUT pipeline. It's worthwhile noting that on LiveGrade, you can go in and do all different types of workflows that are required. We're doing a workflow at the moment that's using freestyle aces, where we've actually been able to put in our own LMTs and things like that. So you can do all of that on set. And again, the cool thing is everything that we do on set gets handed over. So if I'm doing CDL pass here with a new LUT or anything like that, it gets passed directly into dailies, and that's how it's processed. So everything that we're doing on set, everything that your DOP is seeing as he's shooting, that's what gets handed through. So the other thing that we're doing here is, if I just quickly apply a little grade, what you should hopefully see is we've got a live feed coming in here. So it's actually the feed from the camera in there. And this is heading into our QTake system, which I'll talk about in a second. But so you're able to do all your different things here and then quickly record or create a clip. And then you can add in any extra metadata that you want to, adding scene and take, shooting day, etc. And you can customize all of those values. So again, on the last show that we worked on, we had about 48 values that the DOP and DIT had talked together and decided these are all the things that I want to put in there. Is it an external day? Is it interior? Have we got tungsten lights? All of those things they wanted to have noted. So again, it all passes through. So that's a very quick run through on LiveGrade. You'll have to excuse me, I'm going to jump through the software quite quickly, just because I think I've got 6 pieces of software to talk about today. So I'm going to sort of move along and make my way through. So that's where we're at there. So that's DIT. So the next step is QTake, which is what we've got over here. So with QTake, QTake is the industry standard video recorder for onset, and it basically allows you to always have video being plumbed to multiple monitors. Your video operator can actually say the director wants to view scene 12 and play that back while the DOP is watching live feed, all of those things. So it all comes with routing and everything else. What we at the Rebel Fleet decided to get into was really talking about what the video split system can do. And for a long time, it was really just there to service the director and script supervisor. It was just a case of we can record and we can play back. And 90% of the jobs that video split operators do, that's all they're asked to do. And there's nothing more. What we've decided to do is we talked to the guys at QTake, and we spent about a year developing this alongside them, is being able to have all of these iPads that can go out on set. They have a live stream of whatever's going on through the camera, is coming through the QTake system, and you're able to have this here. But the most important thing for us is we now have a metadata window. So now, depending on who is on the set, they can get given an iPad, and that person can be putting the metadata directly into the QTake system, which then becomes your on-set database for all the data collection. So what we've got here is I've just built a few very basic ones. It's things like clip data, shot data, scene data, camera data, script data, etc. So what you might want to do is hand this out to your camera assistant. So we've done this a lot on the last couple of jobs. So now we no longer get handwritten camera sheets, and we no longer get incorrect camera sheets because they're reading the data coming from the camera. And then all your camera assistant has to do is go through here and say, well, actually, we've got another filter in front of the lens. And they simply click on the filter, which I think I set up here. And you can simply click on it, and then you get a drop-down menu of what filters you've got. You can change what grip head it's on, all of those kind of things, and save all of those. The cool thing here as well is the VFX data. So we worked on a number of large VFX shoots, and what you end up having is your VFX team have their own FileMaker database, and they're sitting there and they're adding all of their information into that, but then they don't know that they've labelled it as per the scene intake, but then the script supervisor's decided that actually that was an incorrect scene intake. So she's changed that on her notes. It was never changed on the slate. It was never changed in the VFX wrangling room. All of these things. So then when the post come through to look for that shot, they're stuck. And they're going through old notes and trying to, well, has anyone got that PDF from the script supervisor so I can just go in and ensure that that's there? So now we're actually aligning the VFX database directly onto the clip. And so what we have here is the ability to go in and choose, is this an element that we're going? In which case, is it a clean plate? Is it a foreground plate? All of those things. And you can start adding all of that information in straight away that then hits our QTake database. So I think on the last shoot that we did, we had 4 different teams that had the iPads around set, and they were adding all of their extra information in there. And then we just get into the dailies, we get a dump of that data at the end of the day. It's worthwhile noting that we tried to do script supervisor notes onto here as well, but because of the amount of things that they do in terms of actually amending scripts and amending the script lineup and things like that itself, that they decided that that wasn't going to work for us and it wasn't going to work for them. So what we've now done is we've built our system that works around gathering their FileMaker database and importing it in and utilising it with our system. And again, I'll go into that in a bit more depth. You'll see up on the Splinter unit, it's actually got remote dailies. And so this is something we've done a lot, especially in New Zealand. It's very rare that you're going to shoot everything in a town in Auckland. People go to New Zealand because they want to be out on a beach or they want to be over in the mountain or whatever else. So everything that I'm going to be talking about here is available to be done straight out of a van. So if you've got a really remote shooting location, you can just chuck out all of this stuff in the van. And I did Mulan out of a van, so for Mandy Walker. And we just basically travelled around wherever she went and all of the crazy locations they came up with. And I was processing all of the dailies out of a van wherever we were. The first step is obviously the data wrangling. So this is ingesting the cards. So you've got your camera cards, you've got your sound cards, etc. What we do is we go through and we do a comparison of all the number of clips. And again, we've now got an on-set database, which is recorded every time the camera's turned on and turned off. We're not trying to compare against a camera sheet that somebody's missed 3 clips. We know full well every time that camera buttoned on and buttoned off, so we can ensure that we've got everything that was seen on set directly through to us. And we can also compare those things against the notes that we get from the DIT and the video and the script supervisor and all of that digital work that comes in. And I'm going to show you a bit about the software that we've actually produced ourselves as the Rebel fleet and how that all integrates and how we can start comparing all of those things. The other thing the Data Wrangler does is creates the master checksum from the cards. Now this is quite often sort of just considered one of those little things that happens, and the Data Wrangler just does that. But the importance of this is quite out there, that ultimately if we create the master checksum from the card, every copy that is made thereon after is referring back to that checksum. And we can ensure that every byte that gets put onto the LTO tape, that gets handed over to the AWS cloud, that goes anywhere else in the world, we can ensure that we've got exactly the same number of bytes and that everything is exactly there as per the initial handoff from the camera card to us. So that's something that we really work hard on and ensure that we've got that pass through at every point. Okay, so what is typical dailies processing? So I would say it really is the conduit between set and post. It's where everything gets handed in to the Data Wrangler, all of the video, all the sound, everything else, and it's a case of building it up into something that can then get delivered, an editorial, and everybody else can then actually start having a look at. So typically we do little color grade tweaks. So the great thing with having an on-set DIT is the DOP is already sitting there and he's come up with his idea and he knows what he's after. He or she, sorry. And they know what they're after. So then what we get is the color grade that then comes into dailies. And what we do is we then just do tweaks to ensure that we've got consistency across the board, to ensure that the scenes line up. And we might have shot something 2 weeks ago and we've now shot another bit today. So we ensure we've got all of that. We also do a really thorough QC pass, and this is something that I get into, and quite a lot of my colleagues don't like the fact that I get into it so much, but I love to test sensors well before we start shooting, going in and seeing if there's any weak pixels, if there's anything that's incorrect. One thing that we found quite a lot with the Aries is sometimes with the LFs, especially the earlier models, the two sensors weren't calibrated together. So you'd actually end up with a line running down the middle and you'd have a slight difference in contrast. So it's something that I really take seriously, and we go through a lot of all of our shots and just ensuring every sensor is set up before we start shooting it. And we try and catch any issues and as many issues as possible while we're going through the dailies process. This again just saves money in post. It means that people know what's coming up, what's going to come into their system, and they're not suddenly getting floundered by something as the finishing colorist is then sitting there and they've suddenly gone, well, hang on. I've got weak pixels all over the place, we're going to have to run it through a whole other process that hasn't been budgeted. So we try and look after all of that at the same time. Then we transcode. So we typically transcode going to an online platform such as Moxion or Frame.io, and we also transcode going out to editorial. So that's that. And then another thing that we try and ensure that we do, especially if you've got on-set DITs, is any color grade tweaks that have been made will get turned around and passed back to the DIT. So when the DIT is then looking at shots that they worked on last week, they can look at the shot and have the updated color grade that the dailies operator has done. So they know full well this was what was handed over to editorial, and they're not working on outdated color. Okay, so then the metadata combining. So I'm going to jump into, obviously we've got QTake open here at the moment. I'm going to jump out of QTake and over to OSD. So we typically use OSD as our dailies tool. We're not limited to it, but it's sort of the one that we've grown up using.
On-set dailies, yeah.
On-set dailies by Colourfront, yeah. And so this is, I'll give you a quick demo as to how it works within on-set dailies. It's a very nice and easy system. As soon as you put a card in, the mag loads up and you're able to see exactly what's come through. So for example here, I did a quick run through for somebody called Jack the other day, and we shot a couple of clips in the Rebel Fleet office back at base. So this is just opening up the clip, and if I jump in here, oh, let me just exit out of that, come back in. So when it comes to on-set dailies, Stuart Monksfield right there is your man. He's sold us quite a few licenses now. So there's a few really cool things with on-set dailies that you don't get with some other systems. It really cares about the metadata, which is partly why we've ended up sort of going down this road. So if I come up here and we just go to our window mode and we look at the tools and we see the media metadata window, this is all the metadata that's just captured straight off of the card itself. And so you can see straight away there's a lot of metadata information. Probably 90% of it you wouldn't want to pass over, but it's good to have it all there that you can then go through and utilize the bits and pieces that you do want and hand it over. One thing that we learned on Lord of the Rings when they started using multiple different cameras is that no two cameras name their metadata the same thing. So if you're after ISO, it might be called ISO on an ARRI, it might be called ASA on a RED, it might be called, I think it's pro.apps.blackmagic.com.iso on the Blackmagic cameras. So we then spent a bit of time going through and finding all of these bits of metadata and combining them up so that now you go ISO and you're always going to get the same ISO right from all the different cameras. That was a bit of a labour of love for us over Christmas and New Year. I think we figured out, I did 172 different cameras and we found 2,800 unique metadata fields. And then we ended up starting working our way through and combining them down. We now deliver approximately 60 metadata fields to editorial, and that's combined from all of those different camera metadata. So once we're in here, this is where we would also do our sound sync. I don't actually have any audio for this at the moment, but when we do our sound sync, it effectively pulls all the metadata in from the sound recorders as well. That's notes, that's what the audio tracks are labelled, all of those things. And it also brings in the scene and take. So it automatically labels up all of our scene and take info for us. So once we've got that and we can start going through and we can then build our pipeline and ensure that we're matching our pipeline to how we wanted. So in this instance, we've just got a very simple reframe with a CDL and LUT. And the LUT on this one is just the log C to lin, which is basically the K1S one. And we can then go in and start just making some color grades in here. So typically we've got the panel and we can go through and start tweaking all of those things. So that's a really cool function. And it means that, again, we've got the ability to do all those little tweaks before we then render out. The great thing with Colourfront and on-set dailies is we can do multiple outputs. So rather than having to render anything once and you say, I want to make a QuickTime, I've now got to render that QuickTime, then I've got to go back in and do my Avid DNX. You can actually create as many as you like in here and it will render them all at the same time. So that's a quick run through on Colourfront.
Dailies is normally done where? Could be in a truck, could be at a base, could be at the post house.
Yeah, I mean we've done it pretty much anywhere. We've done it in a garage down south. We've done it in an office. We've done it on set. You know, wherever production really say this is going to make sense. And again, it sort of turns out in different ways because quite often they don't want the camera cards to travel, and they say, well, we just need it close. We just want to hand the camera cards off and have it done once. Or the other option is they do an on-set data wrangler and then they put it on a shuttle and that shuttle travels for a long time. So it's a couple of different things there.
So if you're colour grading the dailies, how will the DP know?
So that's where it then gets pushed up to Moxion. Yeah, so we then, once we've done any colour grading in dailies, typically the DOP will come in and sit with us, is what we've found over the last few shows. So they'll finish on set, wander across, sit down and just say, is it all working? Are we good? Is there any major issues? Anything we need to do?
You don't want to just get back those and think you're all good and you've actually,
you
guys have totally
changed everything up. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. So when it comes to those stills that we export and we send back to set, it's on a limited group. And normally that's just the DOPs and the DITs and the colorist. So then at the end of each night, there's a whole set of stills that go out as well as the dailies for the DOP to be able to go in and look at and just ensure what they've got. Once we've done our dailies here, we've got the ability to add QC notes. So again, this just adds it all into the database. So all of the QC notes that we're adding in here are being saved along with all of our system. This is what we call Sidecar. So this is our own Rebel Fleet produced software. So this has got the complete databases from all of those points on set. It's also got all of the database for the color grade and the script supervisor's notes, etc. So just to run through a quick demo on this. First of all, we've got our upload window where we can go in and choose the files that we want to upload. So in this instance, we can choose whether it's to do with the offload reports from the data wrangler on set, whether it's got the LTO reports from what's been written to tape, the Q-tape reports, live grade, script notes, etc. And we can customize this and have done for every shoot that we've done, where they come in and we speak to different people on set and they come up with new information that they've gathered, and we just build a little workflow to make that happen. So this is all completely customizable. So the cool thing with the export is no longer do we have to go through and sort of build an ALE, custom ALEs or anything like that. It's all done within the system. So for Avid, we simply select the Avid one, and it should come up and draw us up an entire Avid ALE. And this then just drops in, labels up all the clips as per what's gone on through dailies and everything else, and it'll drop in all of that metadata. So like I say, at the moment, we limit that to about 60 to 70 fields, but it all depends on what the DOP, what the editor and everyone else is after being handed across. We've also got the ability to do like a Moxie and ALE, and on top of that, we've also built custom dailies reports. So with the dailies reports, this will give you a full rundown on what's on there. So how much was shot, how many clips, duration, etc. And then we'll come down and it'll also give you any information, so QC notes, any script notes, any of those things. So combining all of that data we've collected into a single report that you can get out at the end. So that's effectively now got your sound recordist, your script, your QC, your camera, your actual information direct from the camera, your metadata, your Wrangler's information. All of that is now being pushed into a single report. So your producers get that at the end of the day. They can then throw that in.
Is that also including any adjustments that you've made as well?
Yep.
So
yeah.
That's listed there as well?
That'll be listed in there. So what we've done in the past is actually have it so you've got your DIT CDL and then your daily CDL. So you can actually see if there's a difference in there. One thing that we're working on at the moment is any extreme grades being flagged as something major. So let's say, for example, your DOP shot something and it was really flat and horrible and really, there was too much smoke or whatever else and there was a lot of contrast needed to be added. We're now putting that through so you can get it, so it gives you a major tick to say there's a lot of CDL values gone in here, there's a lot of color grading going in. This might be something you want to look at in post before you really sort of start getting into that scene. So that's all in there. We also now do an asset report, which is basically your rundown of what's gone on to tape, where it is, which tape every shot's on, etc. And then this isn't going to work here, but just to talk about it, the new thing that we've just integrated is the DPR. So as you might know, production at the end of every shoot day needs to do a daily production report, how much money was spent, who was where, who did what, who turned up at what time, etc. What we're doing now is utilizing the knowledge of how many scenes were shot during the day, how many shots were done, how many setups, and the script supervisor's notes that go in to tell you which are complete and which aren't. And we now push through a DPR direct to production. So before they even start up on their day, they've got a template of the DPR with all of the bits that we can fill already pre-filled for them. So that's something that we started doing on a job in January and took a couple of iterations, but now we've just had feedback that they love it and that it's saving them hours every day to just be able to pull that in and work on it from there. Next up is going into the shot list. So this is where I think our system gets really exciting, and we can really start to work with a lot of the data that we've got through. So in here we can pull in, as I said, this is the complete database for every shot on the entire project. So we can go in and we can pull in an EDL, and then we can look through that EDL for QC notes or anything like that and have a complete sort of rundown. So up here we've got the ability to upload an EDL in here or pull an EDL through. Also here we've got the ability to open EXR push to metadata. So if we didn't do the VFX pulls, but we had all this extended metadata from being on the set, then effectively we can just get a link to somebody's AWS where they've got all the VFX pulls happening, and we can push our metadata into those pulls. So we can effectively add our frame by frame metadata in there. Next up we've got here, if I just select a couple, we have the ability to generate an ALE. So we can then just say we're going to generate an Avid link exchange just for those files. We can generate a report for just those files that we've created, and things like that. So one thing that I love to demonstrate here is that we type in boom, and we see how many times the boom came into shot, and then you can actually export out a report that just says this is how many times the boom's in shot. So just again saves all of that, somebody having to look through it and find it at a later date. It's all there, it's all searchable. And that's the same with all the VFX notes. So if we just want to look for all the blue screen shots, you can just search for blue screen and be able to export all of that out as one. And that's as a report, as an EDL or anything like that. The other thing is we've linked it up to, so what we do with all the data as we gather it is we put it into our large central storage, and that's basically lives on the cloud. And so what we can do is we can pull back any shots. So if you drop an EDL into here and then say, well, I want to drop all of those onto this AWS volume, or I want to drag them all down and bring them into my post house, you can effectively just click pull from tape, and it will go through, find those shots and pull them back in and drop them onto the post house. I spoke about doing EXRs, so now we can do the VFX pulls directly from here as well. And this is all run via the back end of an email system as well. So if your VFX company said, I just want to pull 3 shots, they can send an email with an EDL in there, and it'll automatically pull all of this through. It'll open up our system, do the VFX pull, and then drop it off to wherever they need to. So again, taking out the manual steps.
How is that then talking to where all the media lives? So the media's obviously on what at this stage?
So we keep the media on a large volume and on multiple tapes. So we use quantum storage for all of that. So we've got 1.2 petabytes of storage at the moment, and it's building up all the time. So we can then have as many films or whatever else in there. You get a secure login, you're able to pull those shots, and then we dictate where it's going to.
So that you're keeping that by the duration of the job.
Yep.
This will talk to that, pull that, send that to wherever it needs to go.
Exactly. And that goes for conforms as well, because quite often post houses don't have the infrastructure to hold an entire job. And they sort of go, well, we'll take the LTOs and then we'll pull it off as and when we need it. What we're offering up here is that you don't need to store any of that. Just give that to us, we'll worry about it. You just figure out the EDL, send that to us, and we'll just drop the shots that you require as and when you require them. So it's a case of what we're trying to do is really just encompass. We go in right from the camera rolls, right the way through, and then you just let us know what you need as and when you need them, and then we'll drop it off to you.
Your 1.2 petabytes, that's Rebel Fleet owned storage in Rebel Fleet building in Auckland or Wellington or
yeah, it's split across. Yeah,
and you did that rather than moving things into the cloud because of what massive egress charges?
We haven't yet realised. We started going through putting everything into like an AWS bucket or whatever else, and the price is just astronomical. It's not necessarily astronomical to store it there, but every time you do a pull and every time you want to look at that data, anything else, that's where they just hit you with another charge and another charge. The company that sold us the storage that we're using at the moment has just done the National Archives for New Zealand, and they tried to figure out, exactly what the cost implication would be to put it onto tape in their own data center, or to put it up to cloud. And it worked out to be 28 times more expensive to put it on cloud than to do it on their own thing. So they sort of said, well, let's just build our own thing then. Let's just have it there.
For the big clients who don't want to use your storage,
we can just plug into the cloud.
That's just a business discussion with them.
Exactly.
They can run it on their storage and you lease them your database.
Yep. Yeah. And again, what we're now discussing is, because up until now this has been an internal tool, but with all of this database and with all of this in there, people are now starting to say, well, we want access to that. We want to be able to pull our own stuff. We don't want to have to ask you all the time. So we're now working on a way that this platform can be basically sent out as a web interface. You get your login. You can then go through and start, working through and filtering your own footage, figuring out which bits of information you want to grab and how you want to deal with it.
And your setup in Australia, is that using storage that's in New Zealand for jobs that you're now working on in Australia, or will you replicate that in Australia?
It's a mix, but we're looking to replicate it, just so we've then got it, because again, then we can actually do a complete backup across two countries, and it means if there's a massive fire or whatever else. I mean, we already do one set of tapes go to Iron Mountain, so we've got an external backup somewhere else, but if there was ever a fire or anything, God forbid that happens, touch wood, we'd then just be able to continue the pulls from the other system. So yeah, that's sort of where we're heading towards. Any other questions?
Security's got to be a huge thing.
Massive, yeah. And that's where getting the front end to be external is going to become a big thing. So we've been jumping through a lot of hoops. We obviously did rings with Amazon. where you couldn't do anything without basically signing your life away and talking to a million people and all of that. So that really sort of entered us into knowing what was expected in terms of security and online storage and everything else. Moxian's great because it's got all of the two-factor authentication and everything else. So we use that a lot just to be able to dump stuff back and forth. So all of our stills, all of our grades, etc., they all go onto Moxian or onto an online platform like that. And we're utilising those guys because we're such good friends with them that they're sort of teaching us how we can then start using our front end and opening that up to the worldwide. But yeah, it's definitely, none of it's easy when it comes to the security. And everyone's got different security requirements. Amazon is very different to Disney, who's very different to Netflix. So we're learning as we go in terms of what's required for each of those clients. But yeah, it's an interesting project, and it's been a long time coming, I think, in terms of trying to make it all work as seamlessly as possible.
What do you call this, your own software for?
It's called Sidecar.
Sidecar.
Yeah. So we did have a name called Metabase, which is one that we came up with a long time ago, but then Stephen came into the company and decided that wasn't going to work, and renamed it Sidecar. So hopefully we'll start to get a little bit more out and showing that around a bit. I'm really looking forward to having the first sort of open platform that people can use and be able to give it to productions and be able to give it to the VFX vendors and let them actually go through and be able to amend their own data.
How does that site workflow compare to you guys here that are shooting productions? Similar, different levels, or what do you see? Is it everything from we'll just put a LUT on the camera and we'll bake it out to something like what Pete's talking about?
It depends on your budget.
Yeah.
If you're on a feature film, that's probably something along these lines. If you're on
TV drama here in Australia, achievable?
No, we would probably have multiple LUTs and it would mostly go into the post house, and then probably the workflow might be similar from then on.
Yeah.
But on set, I'd be lucky to have a DIT on set on a TV production.
Yeah, and we do have that. We have that quite a lot over in New Zealand as well, whereby the DIT is sort of a removable section, where it's sort of if the director of photography decides that they want to just to put a LUT on and say that's fine in the camera and I'm happy to watch that through, then we just bypass the DIT process and go straight into QTech, but we've still then got the access for video playback and for all of that metadata collection through there.
How scalable is this for lesser budget? Obviously this is the ideal scenario, bigger movie.
Yep.
Scalable realistically for...
Right the way down. I mean, so we're doing a show at the moment where they don't want any of the bells and whistles, and so we just do dailies, and we've actually built a system whereby it's sort of a typical post house system. We do the dailies, we upload it, it's really, really basic, but we're building the metadata in there. So we still try and capture any extra stuff that's going on set. We just ask if we can get sent through any FileMaker documents or anything like that. So we've still at least got the database, but we turn around. We're working on a show for New Zealand TV at the moment called Taskmaster, and they shot 28 hours of footage in one day, and we turned that around in 4 hours, I think, in terms of just rendering out and passing it. And then the other thing that we do here is we drop directly to the editorial storage. So we just drop it directly on their Synology, so they're ready to start cutting as soon as they get in the morning. So we build all of those connections in as well, so that we're not having to run a shuttle drive across at 9 o'clock in the morning when the editor's still having their coffee and isn't ready to start offloading. So we can build all of that in and make it so it drops directly into the Avid, as opposed to any shuttles.
Any colourists here using any sort of colour information from set?
It's not coming through.
Marcus?
Yeah.
How are you getting that?
Totally depends on the camera. It's just like you said, the Sony Venices have a lot more information, and also depends on the software. Resolve isn't amazing with metadata, but you can hack it. You can build custom workflows like they've done, where you throw Perl's fix it or something and extract it, and then pull that into Resolve that way. So you can sort of cobble together quite complex workflows, with a few little off the internet sort of hacks. But generally, a lot of the cameras do, the Arris do have a little bit of information that comes through.
CDLs?
We love to do them. It's just whether they have the budget. A lot of the shows our company works on often don't have the budget to do kind of like proper days with, you know, best light type scenarios. So often it's no, but it's something we're always looking for an opportunity to do.
I've just requested that on a show because they've been making CDL adjustments on set, and I would rather have those
As a
available
starting
to
point.
me when I'm starting a grade. Otherwise, I've got to go back to the drawing board and just keep checking offline references, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So absolutely, would love that more.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think I think it's a bit of a Hollywood thing, it's not news, where it's, oh no, we don't want anything from ops. Of course we don't. We're all doing the grade. Why would we want anything that anyone else has done? And where I'm concerned, like if I've got 2 weeks to grade a feature, or 10 days, or however long it is, I want as much help as possible to get that balanced out and normalised before I can start to do any cool stuff. And if there's any way that help with bringing anything through, then I'm all in favour of that. And
Does
that's
get
probably
tricky
the same from your DPs.
With the HDR stuff though, with so many sets not monitoring in HDR,
Yes.
then we're having to like go and redesign like our look LUTs and things, and obviously any decisions made on set are not going to filter through. They're not going to be the same when we start the final grade.
Yeah, this is as we thought we'd got all that worked and then come to HDR.
How
And
are you
HDR
guys going with HDR stuff on set?
So it is. We've done a couple of jobs. Typically, because you'd have to fill every monitor with HDR if you wanted to run it through the entire pipeline, and that becomes a very expensive, and production don't want to pay for that. So typically, what we do is we have in the DIT tent an HDR monitor, and we use the FS HDR LUT box, which then allows us to put on the standard Rec 709 LUT and an HDR LUT, and you can then switch between the two. So they can quickly go, well, let's look at it with HDR and how does the grade compare to what we're doing with a Rec 709 LUT. It is at the moment still in its infancy, and I think the on-set stuff at the moment, we're getting more calls for going up to 4K than we are for doing HDR, because, and rightly so, I was talking to a focus puller the other day and he said, this is great that everyone's going to see this beautiful image on a 60-inch screen in HDR and 4K, but I'm focus pulling on what was an HD stream, but then I've got all of my workaround of information. I'm now working on probably 720, and how can I say that that's sharp and it's going to look great on your 60-inch? So that's where we're starting to now. So we're starting to look at all the monitors potentially being replaced with 4K in the next couple of years, just for those sort of scenarios. And also that means that the cameras have to come up to scratch as well. So at the moment, Arri and Sony offer 4K outputs, but it's not every camera. So we can't just plug it in and say that's that good to go.
I agree. I think it is more of a post thing. We'll be talking in a session coming up, what is the difference for the shooters and the colorists and where that difference comes in. The call for HDR, where do you see that coming if anyone's asking you for that?
It tends to come from post, is sort of the first place that we get the request, and then it comes through the director of photography in that way. But it tends to be, if they know they're going to post in HDR and they say, well, we're going to build our LUTs for HDR right from the get-go, now we want to be able to see that that's going to work on set.
You could, in theory, have that built separately for the Hero HDR monitor in the tent that the director of photography would be looking at, and everybody else could seriously get their...
Just gets a 709 sort of feed that's coming through.
That sounds like probably the more realistic workflow.
And that's the way that we've sort of done it up until now, but I do feel like we're on that precipice where we're starting to get asked. This will probably be a thing soon. What are you doing about it? How are we getting prepped for it?
Yeah.
So it is interesting.
You have to buy 60 of those.
I'll get the checkbook out.
Question about sidecar. Does it? I assume you must get a lot of lenses, anamorphic old lenses that DOPs love to shoot with.
Yeah.
That, that doesn't have the metadata come through.
Yeah.
And I imagine you've got to take a camera sheet and write it into that amazing piece of software you've got. Does that then come through, like if we were to do like a resolve pool conform, does the metadata get put into that?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Oh,
So
that's
that would all
amazing.
come through in that. The other thing, just when it comes to the vintage lenses and everything else, we've done a lot of shows with those. So typically your DIT will write those in on their notes as they're going through. But also we've been working with a company out of the UK called DCS, who do a lens system that basically sits on top of the camera, and you can map all your lenses to that. And then we pull that in as another file that goes into Sidecar, and it then has the frame by frame data. It also has the data as to what the lens was, what the serial number was, all of those things. So again, in VFX you can go, it was that serial number, that's my lens grid, that's what I'm working with. So yeah, we're starting to figure out how we can get around those vintage lenses and the sort of the old school ways of working now.
Yeah, because we definitely found like the low-hanging fruit for colorists, like saving time. You know, a lot of the things you're doing is you're like rebalancing lens issues constantly.
Yeah.
So if that lens data, if you've got that and you've built an amazing LUT for that,
Then you just drop that in.
So again, question to the colorist: when was the last time you got any camera shoots? Like when something was shot on film. But see, this is not a problem because I reckon you probably send it to somebody, production, right? To go, we never get those because they never get passed on.
Exactly.
If we go digging, we can ask for them.
Yeah.
As a rule, it never gets to the final grade. The editors get them and editorial, but then they get buried. So where they're grading, go, what lens this was? Because we've got no boards. We're only grading the final thing. Sometimes we don't know any colour spaces, gammas, anything.
That's
So-
a lot of the time, Ross.
How do you request them as part of the workflow?
Well, if we got digging, but as a rule, it doesn't come to us. And that's probably part of the post house not setting up and asking for them and getting them there. So that is hard because a lot of that's lost. We work it out and we can work and we can ask them. As
But
a
it'd be
rule,
good to know
Because
that.
they're mostly digital now, they all
Yeah,
have
it should be.
iPads and they're all done.
Yeah. And so that's where, so all of this information gets embedded into the Avid media itself. So it actually goes against the clip on the Avid. And it was really interesting for me to sit in with VFX on the last show because I thought they would, they might use all of that. They might do a right click and sort of filter through the data. But actually the lead VFX editor had it as burn-ins all the way across his screen. I couldn't see the picture in the background, but he literally just had all of the information. So he had the AC's notes, he had the DIT's notes, the video split notes, all of those things up there. And that was what he was basing whether he was going to use that shot or not. Because he was going, well, this has got a QC note of this is wrong. I'm not going to use that. This has got, the VFX wrangler said that it was the wrong height on the camera. I'm not going to use that. So that was really interesting to me that normally that would be something going through multiple PDFs, multiple databases to find that info out. Love burning.
I was the last film I worked on. Did a lot of guessing.
Oh really? Trying to figure out which shot.
What shot library did this come from around the world? Where did they download this from?
Yeah. So that's, and those are just some of the things that we're getting feedback on at the moment in terms of the way in which people are using this extra metadata we're able to put through. And even just having the script supervisor notes. I had one compositor say to me, it was so interesting to know that the script supervisor said that it was the preferred take because of this bit, when we're not actually working on that part of the shot. And so that to me was really interesting that it's gone all the way through to the people that are doing the VFX, and they're actually able to sort of decipher and figure out, well, why are we doing that? I've got a better shot over here. And if that one's not actually the point, why don't we use that?
At the end of your projects, do you get like an open export? Your whole database can be.
Yeah, so we've what we've done in the past is a massive PDF. So we did one on a previous job where it just became a huge PDF. I think it was 2,000 pages long, that people could then go and refer to, and it's all searchable. So you could just type in your scene and take and camera and get that through. Other than that, we do a CSV file export. So you've just got it. You can open it up in Excel or any of those kind of things. The problem comes into where you've got the frame by frame data, because that in itself, it can be 10,000 lines just for a single shot. So then when you start to get into that, it becomes quite big. But that's where we utilize that to actually burn it into the EXR headers, and then you've got it there. So whenever you're on that EXR, you can just know that's where we were at. And we've got the tilt and roll and all of the lens info in there as well.
So animations, USD is becoming a bit of an open interchange format. There's nothing in your space for interchange between competitors' platforms, is there?
Not as yet, but I'd be keen to have a chat and find out which sort of platforms you think would be worthwhile going into. Because again, what we're trying to do is make it, we've spent a lot of time at the moment on the inputs and ensuring that we're pulling all the data we can and getting it into our database. Our next sort of project is really to figure out how we can hand it over and how we can best deliver it to different people. So the Resolve is something we're looking at, is actually building a Postgres database that we can drop everything directly into that, and then it just becomes native within the Resolve software. And similar to if there's a Nuke database or anything like that that we could drop directly into, would be something that we're very keen on sort of talking to those people.
It's hard when there's no standard.
Yeah.
Across all these cameras.
Yeah.
You've obviously researched that more than I thought, but
I'm going to send you through my database so you can have a be a weekly read.
it would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Any other questions?
How many file formats are you typically spitting out in a day's render pass?
We normally do 3 or 4. So typically it's a DNX for editorial. It's a H.264 to go up to Moxion. And then quite often we get asked for a ProRes to go to VFX. And more recently we've actually been asked to do a full frame ProRes as well, just so the editorial have got a full frame without the director of photography's chosen framing in there. So that's about 3 or 4 is a typical thing. And we use a background renderer on ColorFront, and I think it runs at 70 frames a second, doing about 4 renders simultaneously. So it's no bottleneck in terms of dailies delivery at the end of the week.
Moxion's key frame IO.
It is, yeah. So it was started up by a gentleman called Hugh Calverley about 7 or 8 years ago. It's gone from strength to strength. The great things about Moxion are you can embed metadata in there. So effectively, while we're shooting directly off the camera and recording, it's pushing up to, so you can have this thing called Moxion Immediates, which basically means that when you press record on QTake, it pushes it straight up to Moxion for executives around the world to watch, which is great at times and not at other times. I did have one show where we had a DOP in Auckland and a DOP in China, and the main unit DOP in Auckland hadn't started shooting yet, and the second unit DOP had just started working. And the DOP in Auckland was watching it and ended up giving the other DOP a call and saying, "Can you tilt up and can you move that?" And soon enough that feed got cut. So but the cool thing is when it comes to dailies, we can push all of the metadata directly into Moxion for those shots, and Moxion has an API directly to ShotGrid for VFX. So again, they can then pull all of the metadata we've done, pull it into Moxion, and then drop it directly into ShotGrid on a shot-by-shot basis for VFX pipelines.
And going from like QTake to onset dailies, is it just like an ALE that you're getting to there, or is it more proprietary software?
No, it's just an ALE, but we spent a lot of time just going through the ALE and ensuring that we're just giving across the data that's needed, none of the unique IDs for the one clip that's recorded on the QTake device, etc. So it is basically just an ALE, and it's also the QTake operator that exports out the camera sheets as well at the end of the night now, because they're all saved directly there. So that just all becomes a part of the package.
How many personnel do you have on set for your fully featured
The full. So you'd have a DIT, and he'd typically have a utility. Then you've got a video split operator. He'd typically have a utility. Dailies operator, data wrangler, and there might be another person just as a separate. What we're trying to do at the moment and what we're working towards is building the Rebel Fleet Training Academy, because we've realised that very quickly we just don't have the personnel, especially in Australia. Every time we get a phone call saying who's the DIT that you've got, there's about 3 or 4 really to choose from that we know of over in Australia. So we've just started working towards building a Rebel Fleet Academy in terms of bringing people in, training them up, and we're starting to talk to afters and companies like education facilities like that to try and bring some people through and help train them up to do that. But I think in terms of total people on set would be about 6 or 7, and then we'd hope to bring through some juniors that would also go on there. The problem that we've come across in the past is getting a trainee on for these systems is nobody really wants to pay for food and lunch and all the rest of it to have that trainee on there. But I think that's the real kicker to get people learning, is to bring them in early and get them on set and get them running cables.
Are there any female DOTs in New Zealand? Because the ACS did a survey of Australian, and we found that at least out of the 1,200 people that did the survey, there was no female DOTs in Australia.
We've got one that's coming through at the moment through the training, and then we had an American DIT called Nina who came over and worked for us for about a year and a half, and she was amazing. Yeah. So, but we're just well aware that there's a massive lack of knowledge and lack of people going through it, and unfortunately, what we've had in the past is a lot of people come in and they train under us to learn video or DIT, and then camera is a much more exciting department, and they sort of get used to what we do, and then they move straight into camera and start as a second AC. So we have a high turnover of sort of trainees that come through, learn a bit of what we do, and then move on to camera. Yeah. But no, so I think we've got one currently in New Zealand, but we only have 7 DITs really in New Zealand as well. So it's just, there's a massive shortage, and we really want to try and address that now, especially with the Australian industry is growing so fast, the New Zealand industry is growing so fast, and we keep on bringing in Americans to do those roles, and we shouldn't be.
No, they're better, aren't they?
I'm not going to answer that.
They tell me they are.
Well, yeah, of course they do.
Any other questions for Pete? Stephen, you want to add anything?
I think I'm okay for now.
You're based in
I'm not saying anything.
You're on the Gold Coast. You're on the Gold Coast. If anyone wants to talk to you about anything, you're based up there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, thanks very much.
Awesome, thank you.
Adam Eden over there kindly has brought in his XDR display, and it's hanging off a Mac Studio, and we've also got an LG OLED Pro over there, which is hot from the airport. So we're going to hook that up this afternoon with the same footage that we got here. So if you want to go in the back room, feel free to wander over there and have a look at what's going on there.